I never thought I'd be treated like a junkie in broad daylight, but there I was, standing at the counter of Westfield Pharmacy with a legitimate prescription in my hand, while some punk kid in a white coat looked at me like I'd just asked him to sell me meth. My back was killing me that Tuesday morning. 3 herniated discs courtesy of an IED blast in Kandahar 7 years ago, plus the constant nerve pain that shoots down my left leg like someone's running a hot poker through my spine. Sometimes I still heard the explosion, that split second of silence before the world turned into flying metal and screaming. I'd been walking point that day, checking for wires, when the pressure plate clicked under my boot. Woke up 3 days later in Germany with a Purple Heart and a spine that would never be the same. The VA docs had finally gotten my pain management dialed in just right, a combination of tramadol and muscle relaxers that let me function like a normal human being instead of lying in bed all day wanting to put a bullet in my head. I'd been going to this same pharmacy for 2 years without any problems. Sure, I looked a little rough around the edges, beard a bit scraggly, clothes that had seen better days, and I walked with a pronounced limp that made me look older than my 38 years. But my prescriptions were always legitimate, my insurance always cleared, and I minded my own damn business. This particular morning, though, there was a new face behind the counter. Some kid who couldn't have been more than 25, with perfectly styled hair and the kind of attitude that screamed, "I got my PharmD from my daddy's money." He took one look at my prescription, then looked at me, and I could see the judgment forming in his eyes like storm clouds. "Tramadol, huh?" he said, holding the prescription like it was contaminated. "Pretty strong stuff. What's this for again?" I kept my voice level. "Combat injuries, back and leg. It's all in my file." He made a big show of typing on his computer, frowning dramatically. "Says here you filled this same prescription 3 weeks ago. That seems awfully fast." "It's a 30-day supply. Been 3 weeks and 2 days, actually." I was starting to feel that familiar heat building in my chest. The same feeling I got when some desk jockey at the VA tried to tell me my pain wasn't real. The kid, his name tag read Derek, shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry, but I can't fill this. It's against our pharmacy policy to enable drug-seeking behavior." The words hit me like a slap. Drug-seeking behavior? Are you out of your goddamn mind? I've got a legitimate prescription from a VA doctor. "Sir, please keep your voice down," Derek said, glancing around the pharmacy. There were maybe 6 other customers waiting, and now they were all staring at me. "I understand you're upset, but shouting isn't going to change anything." An elderly woman with blue-rinsed hair actually stepped away from me, clutching her purse tighter. A mother with 2 young kids shot me a look like I was about to start shooting up right there in the vitamin aisle. For a second, I was back in that cobble market, feeling hostile eyes on me from every direction, knowing that anyone could be the enemy. My training kicked in. Assess threats, find cover, watch for sudden movements. Except this time, I was the threat they were all watching. The irony would have been funny if it didn't hurt so damn much. "Listen, kid," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I've been coming here for 2 years. Check your records. I've never once filled early, never asked for extras, never caused any trouble. This prescription is from the VA Pain Management Clinic, signed by Dr. Patricia Hernandez. You can call her office if you want." Derek crossed his arms. "Look, I've seen this before. Military guys get hooked on pain pills overseas, come back, and the first thing they do is doctor shop for opioids. Half the heroin addicts in this town started with legitimate prescriptions." My hands clenched into fists. 7 years of keeping my mouth shut, 7 years of taking crap from people who'd never spent a day in uniform, and this little prick was going to lecture me about addiction while I stood there in agony. "You have no idea what you're talking about," I said through gritted teeth. "I served 3 tours in Afghanistan while you were probably playing video games in your dorm room. I've got shrapnel in my spine and nerve damage that will never heal. But sure, tell me more about how I'm just another junkie looking for a fix." I could still feel the fragments sometimes, tiny pieces of metal the surgeons couldn't get out, shifting around like angry wasps every time I moved wrong. 3 tours meant 3 chances to die, 3 times watching good soldiers come home in boxes, while pencil pushers back home argued about veteran benefits. I'd carried wounded Marines through minefields, called in airstrikes danger close to save my squad, spent 2 months in a field hospital after that IED turned my spine into a jigsaw puzzle. But to this kid, I was just another problem customer. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Derek said, his voice getting louder. "If you continue to be disruptive, I'll call security." That's when Mrs. Patterson, the head pharmacist, came over. I'd dealt with her before, nice lady, always professional. But when Derek whispered something in her ear, her whole demeanor changed. "I'm sorry, Mr. I'm Torres," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We can't fill this prescription today. Perhaps you should try another pharmacy." "What the hell is going on here?" I asked. "You've filled this exact same prescription a dozen times." "Our policy has changed," she said stiffly. "We're being more careful about controlled substances." The humiliation was complete. Every person in that pharmacy was looking at me like I was some kind of criminal. The mother had actually pulled her kids behind her, like I was going to snatch them or something. The blue-haired lady was whispering to her friend about these veterans and drug problems. I grabbed my prescription off the counter and limped toward the door, every step sending lightning bolts up my spine. Behind me, I could hear Derek telling the next customer in line, "Sorry about that. We have to be careful about drug seekers. It's a real problem in this neighborhood." I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, hands shaking from rage and pain before I could even start the engine. 20 years of service to my country, and this is what I got. Treated like a common criminal for having the audacity to need pain medication after taking an IED blast that should have killed me. What Derek didn't know was that before I'd enlisted, I'd worked for the Drug Enforcement Administration. 5 years undercover, infiltrating drug rings from Miami to Los Angeles. I still had friends at the DEA, good friends who didn't like hearing about veterans getting railroaded. That night I called Tony Castellanos, my old partner from Miami, now a supervisory special agent running drug diversion investigations. After I explained what happened, there was a long pause. "Westfield Pharmacy on Maple Street?" he asked. "Funny thing, Marcus. We've been getting reports about that place for months. Pills going missing. Legitimate prescriptions refused while other customers walk out with whatever they want. Almost like someone's running a side business. The thing is, we haven't had probable cause for a closer look. But if they're discriminating against veterans while dealing under the table, well, that changes everything." The next morning I was sitting in my truck across the street from Westfield Pharmacy, sipping coffee and watching the show. At exactly 9:15 a.m., 3 black Chevy Suburbans rolled up to the curb in perfect formation, their tinted windows reflecting the morning sun like dark mirrors. The sound of rotor blades echoed overhead, a DEA surveillance helicopter circling high above, its camera probably recording every second. Men and women in navy blue windbreakers marked DEA in bold yellow letters filed out of the vehicles like a well-oiled machine. Each agent wore tactical gear, ballistic vests, radio earpieces, and the kind of confident stride that said they'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Tony led the formation, his gold badge gleaming on a chain around his neck, aviator sunglasses hiding his eyes. I watched Derek's face through the front window as the agents approached. The kid went white as fresh snow, his coffee cup slipping from his fingers and shattering on the floor. Mrs. Patterson came running from the back room, her hands fluttering around her throat like trapped birds, her mouth opening and closing without sound. The lead agent, a tall black woman with sergeant stripes on her sleeve, held up a folded document as they entered. Even from across the street, I could see the official seal. Search warrant, game over. Within minutes, they had the entire staff lined up against the prescription counter, hands visible, faces ranging from confused to terrified. Agents in latex gloves systematically dismantled the pharmacy, pulling drawers completely out of cabinets, photographing every pill bottle, scanning barcodes with handheld devices that beeped continuously. The controlled substances safe stood open, its contents spread across a folding table like evidence at a crime scene. It didn't take long. By 10:30, they were loading bankers' boxes full of evidence into their vehicles, computers, phones, cash bags, and enough pill bottles to stock a small hospital. Derek was in handcuffs, his perfectly styled hair now disheveled, mascara black tears streaming down his face as photographers captured every angle. Mrs. Patterson sat in the back of a patrol car, staring straight ahead through the windshield like she was watching her life collapse in real time. Turns out my instincts about that kid had been right. He'd been skimming controlled substances for months, selling them to college kids and keeping detailed records of his transactions on his personal laptop. Real criminal mastermind material. Mrs. Patterson wasn't arrested, but she wasn't looking too good either. Apparently, she'd been turning a blind eye to Derek's activities in exchange for a cut of the profits. The DEA found over $40,000 in cash hidden in her office safe, all in small bills. But the real kicker came when they found Derek's customer list. This little entrepreneur had been profiling pharmacy customers, deciding who looked like drug seekers, and refusing their legitimate prescriptions while diverting those same medications to his actual drug-seeking customers who could pay cash. Veterans were specifically targeted. Derek had been keeping a list of military customers, noting which ones looked suspicious or seemed desperate. My name was on that list, along with notes about my aggressive behavior and obvious addiction signs. Tony came over to my truck around noon, pulling off his DEA cap and wiping sweat from his forehead. "Hell of a thing, Marcus," he said, leaning against my passenger door. "Kid had enough controlled substances in his car to stock a small pharmacy, plus about 15 grand in cash and text messages setting up deals going back 6 months. Any idea how long this was going on? Best guess? Since he started working there 8 months ago. Mrs. Patterson claimed she didn't know, but we found evidence she was helping him identify problem customers to refuse while letting the paying customers slide." I shook my head. So they were basically running a drug ring while refusing legitimate prescriptions to people who actually needed them. That's about the size of it. And Marcus, that list he kept of veterans, that's going to play real well with a federal prosecutor. Discrimination against protected classes while operating a criminal enterprise? Kids looking at 10 to 15, easy. The story hit the local news that night. Local pharmacy raided by DEA, staff arrested for drug distribution. The reporter, a sharp-looking woman named Jennifer Walsh, did her homework, She talked to other veterans who'd been refused service at Westfield, found customers who'd bought illegal prescriptions from Derek, even tracked down some of the college kids who'd been buying stolen pills. But the best part came when she interviewed Derek after he'd made bail. The kid was standing outside the courthouse with his lawyer, trying to explain how this was all just a misunderstanding. "Mr. Hoffman," Walsh asked, "is it true that you kept a list of military veterans and specifically refused their legitimate prescriptions?" Derek's lawyer tried to shut him up, but the kid was in full damage control mode. "Look, we have to be careful about drug seekers. Military people have higher rates of addiction because of PTSD and combat injuries. It's just common sense to be extra vigilant." The lawyer actually put his hand over Derek's mouth, but it was too late. The sound bite was already out there, and every veteran in a 50-mile radius heard it. By the next morning, there were protesters outside the courthouse. Not angry protesters, just veterans standing in formation, wearing their dress uniforms and holding signs that read, "Legitimate patients, not drug seekers," and "Derek doesn't speak for pharmacy professionals." The local VFW organized the whole thing. Word had gotten out about what Derek had said, and veterans who'd never even heard of Westfield Pharmacy were showing up to make a point. Master Sergeant Williams, who'd lost both legs in Iraq, rolled his wheelchair right up to the courthouse steps and gave an impromptu speech about pain management and veteran care that had half the crowd in tears. But it got better. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, my pain management doctor from the VA, saw the news coverage and decided to make a statement. She showed up at the protest in her Navy dress uniform. Turns out she was a retired commander who'd done 3 tours as a battlefield surgeon. "I've been treating combat veterans for 15 years, she told the TV cameras. "I've seen real addiction, and I've seen legitimate pain management." What Mr. Hoffman did wasn't medical judgment. It was discrimination, pure and simple. He took it upon himself to override the medical opinions of qualified physicians and deny care to veterans who'd already sacrificed enough for this country. The pharmacy's corporate headquarters tried to do damage control, releasing a statement about inappropriate employee behavior and retraining all staff on proper prescription protocols. But it was too late. The damage was done. Derek pled guilty to federal drug distribution charges and got 12 years. Mrs. Patterson got 3 years for conspiracy. The pharmacy chain settled a class action lawsuit filed by the veterans who'd been discriminated against, paying out over $2 million in damages. As for me, I got my prescription filled at the new pharmacy down the street where the staff treated me like a human being instead of a criminal. But more than that, I got something I hadn't had in years. The feeling that someone had actually listened when a veteran needed help. Tony Castellanos called me a week after the sentencing. "You know, Marcus, we could use someone with your background on the task force. Drug diversion investigations, pharmacy compliance, that kind of thing. Pays decent, and you'd be helping make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen to other veterans." I thought about it for all of 2 seconds. When do I start? 6 months later, I was back in federal law enforcement, working cases that actually mattered. And every time I walked into a pharmacy wearing my DEA credentials, I remembered that punk kid Derek and his theories about drug-seeking behavior. The irony wasn't lost on me. The guy who'd treated me like a criminal was sitting in federal prison, while the drug seeker he'd refused to serve was back to putting real criminals behind bars. Some days the system actually works the way it's supposed to. You just have to know the right people to call.